In the late summer of 1898, the hills still felt untouched, as if time moved more slowly there, wrapping every noise in layers of quiet. The small town sat at the base of thick forested slopes where oak trees grew close together, their branches knitting a ceiling of dark green. People lived simple lives, farmers, traders, widows who rented spare rooms, and traveling men who came and went with the seasons. It wasn't a place used to strangers staying long. People kept to themselves, and secrets, when they existed, usually stayed buried in the soil alongside the dead. Just off the main road, hidden behind a row of tall pines, stood the hotel. It wasn't large, just 3 stories of weathered wood with narrow windows and a porch that leaned a little too much to one side. It looked more like a house than a business, and some whispered it used to be one. The sign out front, hand-carved, fatting, read Hotel, Traveler's Comfort since 1879, but most days it sat quietly. A few lamps glowed at night. A few shadows moved through halls no one could fully see. The man who ran the place, Mr., had arrived in nearly 20 years earlier. He was not born there, not raised in the hills, yet he had managed to blend in just enough to be tolerated. He spoke little, always wearing clean clothes even when the roads were muddy and the air smelled like livestock. People said he was polite but not warm. He would nod to you but never wave. He would listen, but his eyes never softened. He was a man who seemed to carry more thoughts than words, and more history than he ever shared. The hotel had once been pleasant. At least that's what the older townsfolk remembered. In the early days, travelers said the food was good, the beds clean, the hallways lit. But over time, something changed. Nobody could say exactly when. Distant cousins stopped visiting, merchants on the road chose to ride through the night instead of stopping, and the locals began to talk quietly at first about strange sounds and strange faces in the upper windows. Still, a few people stayed each season. Some were desperate, some were curious, some just needed a roof over their head, and always welcomed them, though never with a smile. One of the regulars was a young schoolteacher named Hayes, who had come from Louis the year before. She was quiet but kind, the sort of person who moved through life softly without much fuss. She lived alone in a rented room behind the general store, and every Sunday she walked up the hill to the hotel to eat supper in the dining room. She said she did it because she hated cooking. People wondered if that was the truth or if she was simply lonely. Some believed she was drawn to not in a romantic way, but in a way that suggested curiosity, maybe even concern. She watched him. He watched her too, though never in a way anyone could point to and say that's wrong. It was more silent than that, more careful. Then there was Thomas Bishop, a traveling salesman with a silver tongue and a habit of drinking late. He had visited the hotel 3 times already that year, always claiming he'd only stay one night. He liked to talk, especially when was around. He would say things just to get a reaction, stories about women in distant cities, accusations about politicians, lies about wealth he didn't have. Never reacted, but he listened. The last was a boy, no more than 14, named Samuel. He worked in the kitchen, running plates and lighting lanterns when dusk came. His mother had died the previous winter and his father was missing, maybe dead, maybe not. Gave him room and food in exchange for work. Samuel didn't talk much and barely looked people in the eye. But there were rumors. People said he had seen things in that hotel, heard things no child should hear. Life went on like this, quiet but stretched thin, as if every person near that building was pretending not to notice how strange it had become. Sometimes late at night, lantern light flickered in rooms no one had rented. Sometimes the front door would be unlocked at dawn, the entry rug dragged slightly off-center, as if someone had walked in or out without using their feet. Still, no one complained, not out loud. This was a place where silence was easier than truth, where a person could feel that something was wrong but choose to look away. Power existed in that silence, held it, not because he threatened anyone, not because he had money or friends, but because people feared what they didn't understand and was good at being unreadable. He moved through life with the calm of a man who knew where everyone stood, even if they did not know themselves. Yet beneath that calm, something darker breathed, something that pulled people in without them realizing it. Sensed it, though she didn't have the words. Thomas felt it too, though he pretended he didn't care. Samuel lived inside it, trapped by need and too young to escape. The hotel stood like a waiting mouth. Its windows stared blankly toward the forest. Its halls held memories that never settled. Near the base of the staircase, the wallpaper had begun to peel, revealing old layers beneath, patterns of roses, then crosses, then just pale wood. It was a reminder that things are never what they seem. Not buildings, not people, not the stories they tell about themselves. And in the late heat of August, a storm was coming. Not one of rain or wind, something else. something that would crack open and show what had been rotting inside it all along. No one knew it yet, but the world around the hotel was already beginning to shift, like the first quiet movement before the ground splits wide. Soon the truth would come, and it would not come gently. By early September, the air around the hotel felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Nothing dramatic had happened yet. No one was missing, no blood on the floor, but the people inside were changing. Their thoughts were sharper. Their emotions sat closer to the surface, and the quiet inside those halls had begun to feel like a trap. Hayes still came every Sunday, but her visits no longer felt casual. She watched more closely now, not out of fascination, but concern. He had begun locking certain doors in the hotel, doors she had walked past many times before. Now they stayed shut even when guests were inside. The lights upstairs seemed to stay on later, flickering long into the night. At dinner, she asked small questions, nothing direct, just polite remarks that carried weight beneath them. "The hotel seems busier lately," she said once, even though they both knew it was. Glanced at her only briefly. "People always come through, they just don't stay." His voice was calm, but it carried something harder beneath it, felt it and looked away. She told herself she was being silly, but each time she left that place, something inside her whispered that she should stop coming. She didn't. Thomas Bishop returned that same week, carrying a suitcase that seemed lighter than before. He was thinner, worn down. He drank faster than usual. He tried to joke with Samuel, who only stared back with tired eyes. Thomas had been in debt for months. His salesman roots were failing, and rumors said he owed money to men who weren't known for patience. He thought coming back to the hotel would steady him somehow. He was wrong. He cornered in the hallway one night after too many drinks. "You must be sitting on something," he said. "A place like this, a man like you, you're not just living off room fees." Looked at him as if studying an insect on a wall. "This conversation is over," he said and walked away. Thomas laughed loudly, but the sound had no joy in it. "We all have secrets," he shouted down the hall. "Just remember that other people can have them too." Samuel heard it from the kitchen. He was wiping down plates when Thomas said those words, and something inside him tensed. He knew a great deal about. He knew where he went at night. He knew which room in the attic was never rented. He knew which guests were told to leave early and why they never argued. He also knew that fed him, kept him alive. That kind of dependency wasn't love, it was power. In the following days, behavior shifted. He became more watchful. He lingered in the hallways at strange hours. He started paying attention to who spoke to whom, what they said, and how long they stood talking. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone, but people felt his presence like a shadow stretching over every conversation. Meanwhile, began to notice Samuel's fear. The boy had always been quiet, but now he looked hunted, eyes darting, shoulders tense, bruises blooming on his wrists. She tried to ask him once if he was all right. He shook his head, almost panicked, and walked away. That alone told her more than words could. Outside the hotel, the town was changing too. There were whispers of disappearances along the road, travelers who never reached their next stop. The sheriff came through twice that month, asking questions, checking names, looking lost. He stayed polite because people didn't like to be interrupted in these parts, but his visits left a current of unease behind. Heard the talk at the schoolhouse. Thomas heard worse in the saloon, heard all of it. He always did, and it made him tighten his hold. He began shutting the doors earlier, keeping the lamps dim. He told Samuel not to go into town. He told Thomas to mind his own business or find another place to sleep. He told nothing, but when she walked into a room, he watched her a little too long. There were other visitors too, though no one knew their names. Men who arrived late at night and left before dawn. Their boots were muddy. Their eyes were empty. They didn't sign the guest ledger. And when they spoke in the dining room, Samuel didn't dare breathe. The pressure was building from every side. Money, secrets, fear. Thomas began searching the hotel when he thought no one was looking, opening drawers, checking locked cabinets, packing the halls with drunken frustration. He wasn't just chasing proof. He was chasing leverage. One night he slipped into the kitchen after midnight and found Samuel curled in a corner, staring into nothing. "What does have on you?" he whispered. Samuel didn't answer, but his silence was as loud as a scream. Driven by worry, started staying later after supper. She offered to help tidy dishes, asked Samuel if he needed books or supplies, and tried to catch mood in every small gesture. She felt the danger rising, though she still told herself it might be in her imagination. People said they could play tricks on a person's thoughts. But each time she left the hotel, her skin felt cold, as if she'd brushed against something alive that she couldn't see. His control, once quiet, was tightening. Whenever spoke to Samuel, he noticed. When Thomas questioned his business, he noticed. He began instructing Samuel to keep to one part of the house. He started following Thomas down hallways, and at dinner, when asked simple questions about the town or the season, he responded with words that held no warmth at all. "Curiosity," he once said to her, "can be a dangerous habit for someone who doesn't know the rules of a place." She didn't answer, but she felt the meaning behind it, a warning or a threat or both. The hotel itself began to feel different. The air inside was damp, heavy with a smell that shouldn't have been there, something like mold or old metal. Lamps flickered even when the oil was fresh. The floors creaked in places that no one was walking. Samuel avoided the attic at all costs. He said the boards up there sighed at night, as if someone were lying under them, breathing slowly. By late September, the tension had turned into something sharper. It cut into every moment. Thomas grew bolder, more reckless. One night he slammed his hand onto the dining table and said loudly, "One day, someone's going to come asking real questions, and I'd love to see how you handle that." Didn't move, didn't blink, didn't answer, but Samuel dropped a cup and his pulse skipped. Outside, society was changing too. There was talk of new money pouring into the region, railroads, mining, men who wanted land and didn't care who owned it. People were choosing sides and power was shifting. Knew that. Thomas thought he could use it, wished none of it touched her. Samuel just kept his head down and hoped to survive it. Inside them, things were cracking. Thomas's charm was wearing thin. His desperation made him mean. He drank alone in his room, muttering to himself. Sometimes Samuel heard him through the wall, ranting about money he never had, people who never respected him, and how was hiding something that could finally change everything. His worry turned to dread. She started having trouble sleeping, imagining Samuel calling for help or standing over her bed without a sound. She tried to write letters to friends, to anyone, but never sent them. How do you describe a nightmare that hasn't happened yet? And began to show what was always underneath. His voice lost what little softness it held. His rules became commands. His eyes tracked people like prey. He spoke less, but when he did, his meaning carried sharp edges. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Control didn't require volume. It required certainty. And was certain of two things. People always revealed themselves eventually, and power was taken, not given. The days grew shorter. Shadows stretched longer across the porch. The hotel stood like a waiting throat, hungry for the moment everything snapped. Something was coming. Everyone felt it. None of them could stop it. The night the crime finally came, it didn't arrive with thunder or screaming. It came with stillness, thick, unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. The air outside was cold enough to sting the skin, and the moon sat low, swollen, watching. Inside the hotel, the lamps burned low, their flames shaking faintly, their glow almost sickly against the peeling wallpaper. It was late, past midnight, when Thomas Bishop stumbled down the hallway, drunk but determined. He had been packing his room for hours, muttering, drinking, and convincing himself this was the night he would finally get what he needed. Money, leverage, answers, anything that proved he wasn't powerless. Thomas wasn't a brave man, not truly, but desperation had its own kind of courage. And tonight, he had decided that had something hidden in the locked rooms upstairs, something he could sell, something he could use. Had stayed late and finally left after supper, but she left uneasy, almost sick with dread. She had noticed Thomas's trembling hands. She had seen watching him all night, silent and still, like a snake waiting to see if the mouse would finally step into its path. She had wanted to stay, wanted to protect someone, maybe everyone, but she told herself it wasn't her place. In the kitchen, Samuel cleaned alone. He kept glancing at the stairs, listening for footsteps. He had seen Thomas earlier, slipping a key into his pocket. He wasn't sure which door it opened. But he knew whatever Thomas was planning, knew too. The man always knew. Upstairs, the hallway was dark, shadows stretching long. Thomas's breath came heavy, tasting like whiskey. He held a candle in one hand, the flame shaking, casting a dim halo of light over the walls. The locked door at the end of the hall stood waiting. The one guest never entered. The one Samuel was told never to open. Thomas whispered to himself as he moved. He thinks he's untouchable, thinks he can play God, not tonight. His hand, cold, sweaty, pulled the stolen key from his pocket. He fitted into the lock, and the door opened too easily. The room was cold, bitter cold. The air felt wrong, like it came from inside the earth. The walls were bare, the floorboards were stained, and in the corner, covered in a faded white cloth, was something shaped like a person, a body, or what was left of one. Thomas froze, his throat closed, the candle flickered. He stepped closer, shaking, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He pulled the cloth back. For a moment he didn't understand what he was seeing. The skin was gray, dry, as if death had happened slowly, painfully. The eyes were gone. The mouth was half open, frozen in what looked like a silent plea. The hands were twisted, bones showing through. Thomas staggered backward, knocking the candle to the floor. The flame rolled. Smoke rose. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Oh God, what did you?" "That was a mistake." The voice came from behind him, calm, controlled, certain. Thomas turned, breath jagged. Stood in the doorway. He hadn't run. He hadn't shouted. He simply walked forward, closing the door behind him with one quiet click. "I told you to leave it alone," said. Thomas's face was pale, sweat running down his temples. "You're mad. This is murder, multiple." "It wasn't murder," said. "It was mercy." The candle flame crawled along the floorboard, catching a thread of cloth, spreading. Thomas swallowed hard, shaking. "You can't just lock people away. You can't do this. No one will believe." "People believe whatever keeps them safe," murmured. "Even lies, especially lies." Thomas stepped back, but there was nowhere to go. The wall was behind him, the body in the corner is in front. "Please," Thomas whispered, voice cracking. "I just wanted something, anything, just to matter." "There it is," said softly. "The truth, you didn't come for justice, you came for power." Thomas didn't answer, but the silence was enough. "Moved first." It was fast, shockingly fast. One step, then another, his hand gripping the poker from the fireplace as if it had always belonged to him. Thomas tried to scream, but it came out broken, the sound trapped inside his throat. The first blow hit his shoulder, knocking him sideways. The second struck his jaw, splitting bone. Thomas gasped, choking on blood. He fell to his knees, begging without words now, arms weak, body collapsing. The third strike was to his temple. It ended everything. Silence returned, heavy, dead. Stood still for a long moment, breathing slowly, like a man finishing a chore. The fire on the floor crawled outward, licking the edges of the cloth, curling into the shape of a spreading stain. Downstairs, Samuel heard the thuds. He dropped a dish, heart racing. He took one step toward the stairs, then stopped. He knew what happened to people who went toward the noise in that house. His lip trembled, tears threatened, but he stayed frozen. Returned from the room minutes later, walking slowly, calmly, carrying the poker like it was nothing at all. His shirt was splattered with blood, but he didn't seem to notice. He found Samuel standing at the foot of the stairs, pale as bone. "Go to bed," said quietly. Samuel didn't move. Stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You know what happens if you disobey me." Samuel nodded, just once, and backed away. The fire upstairs was growing now, filling the room with smoke. Returned, dragging a pitcher of water, splashing it over the burning boards. The flames shrank but didn't die. They crawled under the dead man's body, eating at the cloth. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Stood there staring at what he'd done. No panic, just a calculation. He was already thinking how to clean it, how to hide it, where to move the body. How many hours until sunrise? How long until walked back into this place with those worried eyes of hers? How to make sure Samuel never found the courage to speak. But something had changed. Something inside him cracked, even if he refused to admit it. The calm he always carried wasn't perfect anymore, and he knew it. Down the hill woke suddenly in her bed. She didn't know why. But she sat upright, heart racing, breath unsteady, as if something inside her had been dragged toward a moment she couldn't see but could feel, like a scream held silent in the dark. In the hotel, the smoke rose slowly. The body burned. And Thomas Bishop, who only ever wanted to matter, became another secret sealed into the walls of a place that swallowed the truth whole. By morning, the hotel smelled of smoke and damp wood. The fire hadn't spread far, made sure of that, but it left a mark. The upper floor was darker than before, stained with ash, a reminder that something violent had happened there. Yet when dawn light broke through the windows, the place looked almost the same. Almost. Thomas Bishop was gone, not just dead, gone. He had been dragged somewhere in the night, his body wrapped in a sheet that no one would ever see again. Worked in silence the way a man might repair a fence or patch a roof. There was no panic in him, only a slow and careful effort to erase what had been done. He was used to silence. He relied on it like others relied on prayer. Samuel watched from a distance. His face was pale and his clothes were soaked with sweat even though the air was cool. He moved through the morning tasks without speaking, hands shaking when he poured water, eyes darting toward the stairs as if expecting Thomas to come back. But Thomas wasn't coming back, and deep down, Samuel knew it. The truth lived behind his eyes now, stretching him thin. A boy still, but holding a secret too heavy for any grown man. Just after sunrise, came back. She told herself she only wanted to check on Samuel, but she felt something else pulling her there. A weight in her chest. A voice that whispered that last night something had gone terribly wrong. She stepped into the hotel and found wiping soot from the walls, sleeves rolled up, face calm. "What happened?" she asked. "A lamp was knocked over," said. "It caught a cloth, I handled it." His voice was steady, too steady. Looked up the stairs. The air still smelled wrong, burnt fabric, something else underneath it, sour and sharp. "Is everyone all right?" she asked. Didn't blink, yes. She studied him for a moment. His clothes were clean. But his eyes held something colder than usual, something pulled tight, like a thread ready to snap. Samuel stepped into the doorway then, and his attention snapped to him. One look at the boy's face told her the truth. Something terrible had happened. Something he couldn't say. His eyes flickered toward just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Reached for him, lightly touching his arm. "Are you okay?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just silence, a silence that screamed. That day, Thomas Bishop's absence went unnoticed. He had always been a man who came and went, drifting through towns like a storm cloud. People assumed he'd moved on again, chasing money he'd never have. But 3 days passed. His suitcase still sat in his room. His horse was still tied behind the stables, and the sheriff returned. Sheriff Galloway was a tired man, thin and worn by years of sorting truth from lies in small places where everyone pretended nothing was ever wrong. He asked to look around. Allowed it. Calm, cooperating, not a single tremor in his voice. "Thomas Bishop was last seen here," the sheriff said. "He was drunk," replied. "He spoke of heading east. I assumed he did." Galloway studied him. He didn't pay his lodging. He said he would return for it. A half-truth delivered with ease. Samuel stood nearby, hands clenched, lower lip trembling. The sheriff looked at him, saw something, fear or grief or a truth trapped behind the boy's teeth, but Samuel didn't speak. He couldn't. Watched from the doorway. She wanted to scream, ask better questions, press him harder, take the boy aside, look at the walls, smell the air. But she didn't know what she knew. Not yet. Only that something was gone, someone was gone, and calm was too perfect. The sheriff left without answers, without a body, without a crime he could name. Began to talk. At the general store, in the churchyard, men smoking pipes outside the mill. They said Thomas Bishop must have run off again. They said he was always unreliable, always restless. Some said he probably owed money and fled before anyone could collect. A few wondered if he was dead, out there in the woods or on the road, but no one said it too loudly. Thinking too hard about missing men made life uncomfortable in places like this. But the hotel changed. Guests stopped coming. Lamplight glowed through the windows at night, but fewer shadows moved inside. Samuel's footsteps grew slower. Visited every evening now, unwilling to admit why. She told herself it was for the boy, to make sure he was eating, but she also watched. She watched how he moved, how he spoke, how he seemed heavier inside himself. Because even if would never admit it, the crime had touched him too. Something inside him had shifted. He slept less. His temper flickered at small things. His voice, once quiet and cold, now cracked at the edges. He leaned harder on Samuel. He watched with a new kind of suspicion, as if she might somehow peel the truth open. But it was guilt that haunted him, and fear, not of being caught, but of losing control. Control was everything to him. Power was the only language he trusted. And now there was a body in the ground somewhere behind the woods, and death had come inside his walls again, this time by his hand. Lay awake at night, replaying every moment, every look, every strange silence, and the dread grew. She wrote a letter to the sheriff, but never mailed it. She tried to ask Samuel again, gently, if something had happened. He shook his head and then cried when she walked away. The boy was breaking. He began sleepwalking, waking in the hallway, shaking, whispering things he couldn't remember. Sometimes found him like that and quietly guided him back to bed. Sometimes woke him instead, holding him close, telling him he was safe even though neither of them believed it. People in town noticed her visits. They asked questions she couldn't answer. They wondered why a schoolteacher spent her evenings in a hotel that no longer welcomed guests. Saw the looks, he heard the whispers, he felt the shift, subtle but real. The hotel was losing its silence, and he could not control that. The final break came when Thomas's brother arrived. A man bigger than Thomas, louder, angrier. He rode into town demanding answers. He asked everyone he saw, and finally he came to the hotel. Met him at the door. "You were the last to see my brother," the man said. His voice was tight with grief and rage. "So tell me where the hell he went." Stared at him, expression unreadable. He was free to leave, he did. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." But this time, someone else was listening. Samuel, standing behind the stairs, shaking, tears in his eyes before he even understood why. He stepped forward, voice tiny, cracking apart. He never left. Everything froze. Turned slowly, controlled, but beneath his skin something broke. "Samuel," he said quietly, "go upstairs." The boy didn't move. The man, Thomas's brother, stepped inside, fists clenched. "What did you do to him?" Arrived at the door at that exact moment as if pulled by fate. She saw the rage, the fear. The boy was frozen in place. The look on his face, not anger, not worry, but something colder, something like inevitability. The lies were breaking, the silence was ending. Everyone could feel it. The crime had been committed, but the aftermath, this slow unraveling, was far worse. The truth had begun to seep through the cracks in the walls, and everyone inside the hotel was now trapped in its shadow. There was no going back. Not for Samuel. Not for... And once quiet and untouched by time, would never forget the day the dead finally made themselves known. In the final phase of the story, justice arrives, though not in a form that brings complete peace. The courtroom becomes the last battlefield where verdicts are delivered and the fates of everyone involved are sealed. The perpetrator faces legal punishment, whether imprisonment or a harsher sentence, yet the question lingers, was justice truly served? The law may have spoken, but morality remains unsettled. Others who enabled or ignored the warning signs may escape formal punishment, but are left carrying the weight of guilt, secrets, and shame. Lives are shattered beyond repair. The victim's family must learn to live with a wound that may never heal, while the perpetrator's family wrestles with disbelief, denial, or public humiliation. Friendships, reputations, and futures have all been reshaped by the crime. There is a permanent before and after. The media plays a brutal role in this aftermath. Headlines explode across screens, documentaries are pitched, social media erupts, and the story is exploited for clicks and outrage. Some defend the accused, painting them as pressured, manipulated, or mentally broken. Others demand harsher punishment, fueled by anger and moral panic. The crime becomes more than an individual tragedy. It becomes a symbol for everything society claims is wrong. Moral decay, failing systems, toxic relationships, or ignored mental health. As the public battles over meaning, deeper societal issues rise to the surface. The crime exposes cracks in institutions, corrupt policing, ignored warnings, broken homes, class disparity, or cultural pressures. Politicians make speeches, reforms are promised, and experts debate causes. But over time, the world moves on. The crowds go silent. The cameras leave, yet the pain remains for those who lived it. Thematically, the story ends with a reflection on morality, not in black and white, but in shades of gray. No character is purely a monster or a saint. Power dynamics, manipulation, trauma, and hidden desires all played roles. The crime becomes a mirror, showing how easily ordinary lives can slip into darkness when fear, obsession, or anger takes hold. Even after the case is closed, the environment bears scars. An abandoned house, a silent neighborhood, a name that people fear to speak. The story ends not with perfect closure, but with a lingering echo, a reminder that while crimes may end, their consequences never truly disappear.